Well, welcome everyone. I, like to start with setting our motivation. Um, and then you know, you should be only be thinking about your motivation as we're setting the motivation, but maybe if you have any kind of questions or things that you want to talk about, I'd really like to kind of open up with that and then sort of launch into just a couple of things that I thought would be important to add in our discussion of karma. And then my thought was to maybe do a little bit more meditation, going a little bit deeper, focusing on the non-virtues of body and doing kind of purification meditation around that. So that's my thought for today. Um, so let's all take a breath or two and settle our minds. And now bring to mind your motivation for being here tonight, taking this class. And maybe also recalling perhaps the first time you ever felt truly inspired or touched by the Dharma, a moment of connection, some sense that this path is true and suited to you. And then maybe in that moment of inspiration, you had some feeling of confidence that enlightenment, bodhicitta, might be possible. Maybe you felt that the teacher that you met perhaps had those qualities and you were inspired by that. And touching that moment mentally, allow yourself to be filled again with that inspiration and confidence. And thinking about your own suffering and the suffering of all living beings, bring to mind the moment you felt greatest compassion and a wish to help. And then more than a wish, maybe you felt a responsibility, a determination to help them. So connecting once again with all of these aspirations, the wish to help every living being, the wish to eliminate our own suffering and their suffering, to rid ourselves of the negative emotions that bring so much pain to ourselves and others. And let's set the motivation for tonight's class that our time here spent together will be an investment in that. How wonderful that would be. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and we will do refuge and bodhicitta. Do it in Tibetan twice and then in English. Sangye chodong soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chanyan bipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho Sangye chodong soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chanyan gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits that I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Thank you. So yeah, let's open with, I don't know, some discussion, or if there are any questions or anything specific that anyone wants to talk about, or I don't know. I'd like to offer some opportunity for you guys to participate. And if there's nothing, that's okay too. But I'll give it a pause. It's so hard to read the room when over Zoom, you know? Okay. So I guess oh yes, Robert.
Okay. Simple question. I can't figure it out. It seems like there's some things that are not karma. So, for example, I rob a bank and the cops show up. That's cause and effect, right? Because you still have to have a mental intent ready to karma, correct?
Yes.
If I
So
got upset, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no. Well, finish, because I want to make sure that I'm answering your question and not what I think you're asking. You know,
I,
but
I
what
like to hear both. um, what if I got upset about the cops or did other stuff that could create a karma? Because that would be a mental um, affliction to it, maybe, and cause karma to arise. But there still seems like there's still a case for things cause and effect just by itself. There's a law, something like that. I don't know if I'm articulating that correct. It seems like there's got to be a point where there is no karma created. It's just the reality of interacting with other people. I don't have the right words for this. Hopefully that kind of got it close.
So let me try, and then maybe that will help clarify your question if what I say isn't at all addressing what you're asking. So it sounded to me like what you're asking is, so say I have an intention to do something, and the example you gave was robbing a bank, but the cops show up. So you didn't complete that karma. Was that kind of the direction that you're going?
Okay, so I would assume there was a karma arise, I robbed the bank, so, and then there's more mental implants. But the cops showing up in itself is not karma, right? Is there still not things that are not karma that still have a cause and effect?
Yeah, so you could say that everything that is appearance is related to karma in some way, right? So we talked about, there's that karma, like we're creating karma, but karma is also the result of the previous karmas we had. So it is both the cause and the result, we could say. But in the case of I want to rob a bank, like if we're looking at technically like a full path of karma, right? We have an identified activity that we want to do. We have an intention, we identify what we want to do, and then we actually execute that action, and then we're glad about it, right? That's a full path of karma. But also just recognizing that there's a full path of karma. Like I have an intention to rob a bank, and so I get in a car correctly and drive to the location. And when I arrive there, I'm glad I arrived there. So I haven't robbed the bank yet. I don't have that full karma, but I have that karma of wanting to rob the bank, planning to rob the bank, and going through all of those other actions. So all the reason I put it that way is to say that there's these mini cycles that happen as well, right? So it's not all, there's a lot of different karmas popping at any given moment. And some are the result of something in the past. In fact, we could say that they're all a result of something happening in the past, because one of the ways that karma ripens is as a habit. So I'm inclined to do this thing because I've done this before. So I'm creating a new karma, but I'm also experiencing that as a result of something I've done in the past, a habit that I've created in the past. Again, I'm not sure that that's addressing what you're, and yeah. And does anyone else, maybe someone else understands the question more than I do, or has the similar question? I don't feel like it's satisfying. Maybe that's okay. I mean, as I said, but am I close to like what you're looking for?
Maybe I don't understand just enough. What you explained was perfect. I do understand that. It just seems like there's still got to be a case for things that just move along without karma. Like the police still showing up. If the cops got out and shot me, that'd be their karma ripening, be my karma ripening, correct?
Yeah,
But if they just come and arrest me, it seems that's just law and order.
that's karma too. Like law, what we call law and order. That's karma too. So now we have other questions, but yes, yes. So whether or not they show up, whether or not you're arrested, whether or not you're shot, all of that is your karma. And how you're reacting, how you're thinking about it, what you're saying, what you're doing, as all that stuff is happening, is planting seeds for other ripenings at some point in the
Yeah.
future. So it's both. But now we have other folks.
Okay.
So I'm gonna Nim and I don't Aphasia. Maybe you can help me with your name pronunciation.
It's a Fisha.
Aphasia. I think that what. All right, good. I was close.
Yeah, Bonnie, I think the question is the cop turning up, is that karma as well? And my understanding is that it is,
Yeah.
for us to not go ahead with robbing the bank because of that cop turning up is also karma, which means we weren't able to complete that karma.
Mhm.
Karmic action, negative action was stopped because the cop turned up, and that was also that's positive karma ripening in a way.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good karma.
Yeah.
It because
So
and even if they killed us, that could be a good karma.
correct.
If they
Yes.
stopped us from doing something that was going to be very negative. Yeah, absolutely.
So but there is this, some people believe that some aspects of life is not karma. My understanding is that Buddha never said that.
That is my understanding as well. But I will say that I've had with one person in particular who was much more educated than I, actually a Larampa Geshe, we would have these conversations about karma. And he would say, you can't say karma. And I was like, okay, do you mean I can't say it because I can't see it directly? And I think part of it was a cautionary warning, like, don't just say, oh, that's just karma, right? Like that's ill-informed also. And
Yeah.
he would say it's causes and conditions. And then I would say, where do the causes and conditions come from? What is
Yeah.
that? You know, that
Yeah.
that must be something created that. So we would have these, debates where I never felt like it was satisfactorily resolved. And it could just be my ignorance. But I think also this is the stuff like that we're really grappling with is reality. Um, and again, I think I've said every class, because I don't think it can be overstated, only a Buddha sees this directly. First
Yeah.
they see the emptiness of all phenomena, simultaneous, and actually how it's put is they see both dependent origination and they see emptiness simultaneously. So,
Yeah.
and that's how they're seeing how karma is working,
Yeah.
and creating that reality.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you start saying some things are karma related, some things are not, then you don't have the rules to say what's karma, what's not karma. And I think that's the key here. If you start
well,
saying some
go ahead.
things are karma related, some things are not, then how do you differentiate?
Well, and does that do are those things inherently existing? I think would be the next question.
Correct.
Are they
Correct. Not
right?
dependent on relation.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like it would be something that would be unchanging and permanent. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But I think that's what we're looking for is like, what is it that isn't karma? And Robert, when you said that's just law and order, it's like law and order is karma. The fact that today the sun rose, we have the karma to see the sun rising. We have the karma to see ourselves as human beings. that that karma can shift. And when we talk about, past and future lives, it's a mental shift that could happen in a moment. That you could look down at your hand and see a dog paw, for example. It's not some mystical that you're, it's happening. It's a mental thing that's happening that causes you to take some rebirth. It's not like you're necessarily going to some different mystical place. It's a shift in your perception that's forced upon you from your karma. So forcing you to have a totally different experience. Like if, my examples are never good ones, but like if suddenly, uh, I don't know, what is that? Spontaneous combustion happened to me. Things happen to us like in an instant, and it's just a shift. Suddenly a a seed ripens and now it's a whole different reality. I want to honor Jennifer, who's been waiting. Uh, you had a question or a thought, and hopefully we didn't move past what you were wanting to add.
It's a totally different question. So if you still want to talk about what you're saying, I can wait.
I think it's okay. I don't know that I feel like if I'm having a debate with a Larampa Geshe and not getting a resolution, then my skill here is definitely not going to probably resolve it very much. So
So I was wondering a couple things. One, do beings who have seen emptiness and Buddhas, do those two types of beings experience karma for one? And for two, as you get close, farther and farther along the path, do you become more and more holy? Like, do you ease into enlightenment versus one day you're fucked up and then the next day you're um holy? So
well,
those were
there's something called Dzogchen. There's something to be said. I think it feels experientially, it feels like a gradual process, but then one day something runs out. I think it's safe to say you would have some indications along the way, but how rapidly, you could have like an amazing realization. And yeah, and Milarepa is a story, someone who was out, committing crimes and killing people and, had a shift, had a realization. So there's always that potential because we have eons and eons of positive karma as well. So if that ripens at the right time, you could see a real transformation is totally possible. But to your original question about whether or not they have karma. So what a Buddha experiences is we no longer use the word karma for
Okay.
what Buddha is experiencing, but they're experiencing something um, that they have caused. And I don't know what it's called actually, but what I've always heard is it's not karma, but they're in a Buddha paradise. They're experiencing great bliss. Um, but I think maybe it's just qualitatively so different that we don't say a Buddha has karma, but an Arya being certainly has karma. So,
Right.
so they spend the rest of their lives, their limited lives now, because they're stream enterers, they are on their way out. Like they have seen the thing that will cut the root of the cause of our suffering, which is ignorance. So they have an understanding of truth. So imagine, I think it's not unlike, if I go to a movie theater and I watch a really scary movie, I could be terrified, but I do know it's a movie. And so it doesn't change the fact that it's having an effect on me. It's not pleasant, it's scary. Well, I guess if you want to go to a scary movie, maybe it's pleasant for you, but whatever. What I'm saying is, this movie, because that's actually what they realize when they see emptiness directly. They realize that this is appearances, and that dramatically changes how they react. So imagine if you and I think it's a decent analogy. Imagine that you're acting, that you realize like, oh, this is essence, this is a play. This is the story of my enlightenment. Uh, Now everything that happens, everything someone does to you, good or bad, like, oh, this is appearing this way. Oh, I must have some, negative karma that I need to purify. So when someone's harming me and doing something negative to me, then I understand, oh, I've created the causes for this, and now I'm getting rid of that karma, and you're glad. It doesn't mean you like it when it's happening. And there's a story, and unfortunately, there's a scriptural story that I can't recall all the details, but it's basically a past life looking back and seeing, yeah, that time that so and so, stabbed me. I really didn't like it, but I understood where it was coming from. So that's the kind of experience like an Arya has until they become enlightened.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So the second question I had, do people get better and better as they go along the path? Like I haven't done like analytical meditations on emptiness or renunciation. I did a couple on renunciation and I tried a couple on emptiness. I'm assuming that's like what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
there's so many things that you can do, you know,
That's
there's
like
so
stuff.
many
I mean, I
methods.
go to teachings and I try to meditate a little bit and do yoga and
There's
I'm
so
trying to
many methods.
because
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what's missing because like I don't feel like things are better and it's been it's been a while that I've been studying and stuff. So I'm just curious
Sometimes,
like what it is I need to be doing. Sorry. I
no,
didn't mean to
no,
get all that.
no,
So,
no. Sometimes it feels like things are getting worse because we are up two things, applying a higher standard and also really looking at our minds. So we're seeing things that, maybe 10 years ago, you wouldn't have even thought was a negative thing. It wouldn't even been on your radar. And now you're working on cultivating your heart and mind in a way towards perfection. And so these things now, but you're like, oh, I see all these negative things, or I'm experiencing all these negative things. It feels like I'm getting worse. There's, I'm sure that's not the case, you know? Um,
It's definitely not worse. And I mean, I do feel like I enjoy the things that I'm doing. I enjoy the reading and the classes and the meditation and yoga, and I like it. Um, I just would like the bliss. I want to
More
get to the
results. So we all want the bliss, you know, that's the blessing and the curse, that we all want the bliss. Usually we're
yeah,
chasing bliss in some uninformed way that
yeah,
causes us problems. If you want the bliss, then I would say seek out your teacher. If you
okay,
haven't found that, and you know, maybe they're far away, maybe they're not in this life, but you'll know them, you'll recognize them, and that really helps. The devotion, when you identify that person and
okay,
and add that to the mix, it's such an inspiration. You know, it can also be very difficult. You know, working with your guru can be challenging, but it really helps. It's the fire on the path. And so when people are, but I think also we have, and forgive me because I there's other questions and I don't want to go too much off topic, but you know, guru is such an important, um, like in, supremely important. And there, I think there's a tendency, and I want to say in the West because that's what I know. I mean, for all I know, it's just a universal human tendency. I don't know that. But I know in the West, what I see in myself and what I've seen over, you know, 30 years of practicing is that we're like go typically go in one of two directions. One is being overly excited and almost like a emotional, like an infatuation, like throwing ourselves into something that maybe we even call or think is guru devotion. Um, and the tip off there would be if we think the guru is self-existent and the guru is self-existently good, and you know, my guru is better than your guru, or any of those kinds of thoughts, it's kind of a, it would be a indicator like, okay, maybe that's not guru devotion. But I think a lot of times people want to throw themselves. They want someone, and we talked about, you know, karma, someone else can't do it for us. Someone else can't get us enlightened. But oh, they can inspire us. They can be a living example. And that we need that. We need to see even someone just a few steps ahead of us on the spiritual path to help us have that confidence to keep going. And I think with that does come a feeling of bliss. But so, you know, I see people that want to throw themselves into devotion in a way that probably isn't going to be helpful. And then the other thing is people who are just afraid and don't even seek a teacher or a guru in that way, you know, and like the world is filled with stories of terrible gurus and, you know, all kinds of things. And especially Westerners, we want to be independent. We don't want to turn over our thoughts and minds. And I think there's something very healthy in between those two, which is what real guru devotion is, which is finding, identifying a spiritual teacher who resonates with your mind. And that's the power they have. It's that inspirational power that they have, the power to like motivate you. And then if we are doing, if we're studying and we're studying emptiness and we're studying karma and we're meditating and we're looking at our own mind, we get this interesting thing where we're definitely relying on the guru, but we are not abdicating our own responsibility and judgment. And that's a delicate thing because in a way we're using the appearance of the guru to perfect ourselves. And we're not looking for a guru necessarily to be perfect. They should certainly appear to be much better than us, and it's great if they appear to be perfect. But if they appear to be self-existent, that's a problem. So that's a way long answer. But just hearing you talk, I think probably guru is missing. And
Gotcha.
and it's okay if a guru is missing. It takes time, but maybe that it's time to try to find that guru and allow yourself to cultivate that devotion, that just, appreciation for their qualities and inspiration from the example that they provide. And I think you'll find there's something blissful in that. There's something in that that helps the path to feel more joyful. I would offer that.
Okay.
I
Thank
hope
you,
that
Bonnie.
helps. Hope that
Yeah,
helps.
it does.
Um,
Thank you.
so I'm sorry, I want to say, okay, I don't know if it's hi, yai, or jai. So again, forgive my ignorance, but
I prefer to be called Jay, but I do acknowledge
yay,
that,
that's
yeah,
even,
yeah. But I
sorry.
acknowledge that most people pronounce it Jai, and I kind of have to cop it sweet, so that's all right. So
Jay is good.
I'll answer to either. Now, my question, and it's not so much of a question, it's a comment and something I struggle with. I have been, generally, I can sort of look at karma. Well, to me, karma makes no sense unless there are previous lives, from my point
Yeah,
of view. Yeah, fair enough.
I would agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So there are times, most of the time, I can be agnostic about whether there are previous lives. I have no experience of this. And it's certainly not something, from my culture, et cetera, et cetera. So I find that I do struggle with the concept of karma, particularly right now. I don't feel as neutral. I feel sort of like I've simply gotten, after all this time of looking at, studying, et cetera, meditating, I have no concept of past lives. So it's like I'm feeling at this point rather like karma doesn't exist, and a little bit I fall back on Western philosophers, which is and sort of Western civilization. You do good because it's the right thing to do. Full stop. Yeah, I don't need karma to motivate me to do good things. And that's what it feels like with Buddhism, particularly because I've been exposed to the Lam Rim. It's like, okay, honey, you got to accept the fact that if you don't do the right thing in this life, then you're going to cop it in the next. And I feel like I don't want that. I don't even want that motivation. I don't find it altruistic. So yeah, so that's just some of my comments, and I'd be interested in any input you want to give.
Yeah, so I can totally appreciate that. I think so one thing I would say though, as a Buddhist, and you've made enough of an investment that there must be something in the Buddhist teachings that has been helpful. And so I would offer maybe to table the decision that there's no such thing as karma or past and future lives. And then I'm hesitating to say this, but that is actually negative karma to make a firm decision that that's not the case. So it doesn't mean you have to believe in karma, but maybe just to have that little bit of room for past and future lives and karma of like, I just don't know. And that doesn't conflict with, I have no experience of that. I have no way of being able to verify it. All these things are true. Um, and why would that be a negative karma? I think maybe because the Buddha is a trustworthy being. And so he didn't say, I think this is the case. Hypothetically, this is the case. Let's look at this as a metaphor. He said, this is what I saw. And so it's a question of, do we take refuge? And it's okay. We don't have to take refuge and we don't have to be Buddhists. But again, just maybe a little bit of room, because I think it's interesting to say, I don't find that altruistic. I totally can. That I can absolutely relate to. I've had very similar thoughts myself, but I believe that I am very fortunate now to have the mental continuum that does not need that as a motivation. And I think that came from some very positive karma that was created. And I think it could run out. So I will tell you, many years ago, one of my teachers was teaching on karma. And he said, there are those who, when we're young, we have these idealistic thoughts. We want to change the world, peace, love, harmony, willingness to go out there and, protest or fight the injustice or whatever it is, that you see that very often in youth. And he said, it's no coincidence that innocence, or not to say that every young person or every child is innocent, but not to paint that too firmly, but by and large, you can look and experientially see that it seems like there's a lot of goodness that's popping. And he was saying, you hit the jackpot, precious human rebirth, no accident, a lot of other positive things are popping. And then we go through our lives and we learn and we become jaded. And, he said, the day may come when you go back and you look at, these books and these things that you did and these ideas that and people could say now, like, oh, there was this whole hippie generation that then became like these totally materialistic people, could use that as an example. And he said that, and it just struck me as possibly true. And then he said, there's some of you here today that you're having I want to say holy experience. It wasn't the word that he used, but certainly there was that feeling that we were getting these teachings and there was an appreciation for the Dharma. And he said, and that can change too. And then I watched, 30 years, you're around a while and you see where it does change for people. And it's okay. I'm not saying they're bad people, but so what I'm saying is the things that motivate you now, and that's just in a single human life that we can change. If there's such a thing as a next life, and if the wrong seeds were to pop, then we might not be so benevolent in that next life. What happens to a being? I also think in this life, in this, country or, Western world where we certainly have problems, but for many of us, there's plenty. And so it's easy maybe to be a little more generous and a little more benevolent. But what if you're in a place where there is, incredible poverty and violence? And then you see in some of these, and these are not, it's not because we're better or they're worse. You can see where people become very violent and they look out for number one because they have to. And all of that, I would just offer, could be karma ripening. So, I mean, all I have is just the acknowledgement that what you're saying, I can't see this directly. It's a hard pill to swallow. I was
Let
never.
me just let me just chip in this bit. What I become confused about is also that, as I understand it, and certainly there are folks who articulate it quite clearly, that the Buddha said that look at this and see if it's true for you.
True. Yes. Scrutinize the teachings. Yes.
So that's where I'm up to. I've scrutinized this and I don't get it. It doesn't seem real for me. And so, okay, so that's my karma.
Yeah. Well, no, but I think there's a difference between not getting it and not seeing it and just deciding it can't be true, because I think there's always things that we haven't seen.
Oh,
that
yeah,
could be
no.
true, right?
I don't feel like I'm not in the position of saying it can't be true. What I'm in the position of saying is, for me, I don't have any experience of this. I don't see, it doesn't impact consequently, like it seems to on a lot of people. Who can hold the hypotheses, because most folks, I don't know anybody who can say confidently, personally I don't, confidently I have had other lives. Yeah.
You know, what's interesting is hearing you say this, if I'm totally honest to my core, I have faith in karma, but I'm not so sure that it motivates me. And I would say to the extent that it doesn't motivate me, it's a problem for me, probably, you know? Because because karma is not just the negative stuff, right? It's the positive stuff. And so, like, is there a fire under my butt to create the causes to get enlightened? Let's talk about karma in that very practical way. Like, is there a fire under my butt? Am I constantly trying to get out of samsara? If I don't even believe in past and future lives, how much am I really trying to get rid of suffering? Do I even believe that I can get rid of suffering? Do I even have renunciation? You know, these are all like, uh, and I think as practitioners, like we have we have times where we're like, yeah, okay, I do have this. And then other times like, oh, you know what? This probably isn't motivating me very much either. And but for me, that's a tip off that like, oh, you're saying that and it resonates with me. And I'm thinking, to me, that's a sign just that like, well, I, that's where I am. And it's okay that that's where I am, but I want to do better because I want to have a fire under my butt. I want to be motivated to get out of this. And I can't. If I don't really think, because, you know, there are days I honestly, do I believe in the truth of suffering? On a good day, unfortunately, I don't. Sometimes, you know, it doesn't come to my mind. That's why we study Lam Rim. That's why we're putting it in our head and meditating on it, you know, because does it seem like that everything is suffering? Nope, sure doesn't. And that's a problem. You know, that's what keeps me eligible for a host of suffering all the time, you know? Like, so, you know, you're not alone. You're not alone. I'm teaching the course on karma, but I'm like, yeah, how much is this, you know, this theoretical, this intellectual knowledge, how much is it motivating me? Yeah, maybe not enough. I would say definitely not enough. But I would say that's part of my problem. That's part of what's keeping me here. You know, earlier in the course, you know, I said something about low level radiation. Yeah, there's that. And then there's probably this. You know, it's probably the two things. That's what's keeping me here. You know, I'm not, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that. Truly. Thank you.
thank you. Samantha, thank you for being so patient.
No worries, Bunny. That was helpful to hear your response to Jay because mine is a little bit similar, where it's not necessarily a question, but maybe something that I would like to work on, and I'm not sure how, because for me, karma is very annoying in the sense that I understand karma logically, but I think sometimes we can use it to spiritually bypass or victim blame. For example, kind of like the police, where let's say someone gets caught drinking and driving and they get off, they get the ticket, but our court system, they spend a lot of money, they get off. And this happens 2 or 3 times. Eventually, they're still drinking and driving, and there's a bus full of kids and they killed them. Well, as far as karma goes, that was those kids' karma, and that was that other guy's karma to get off. And then, but where then are the responsibilities or people? And even when you mention law and order, it's and this is my ignorance where it feels like, yeah, sometimes, but then other times I understand it's in later lives and that type of thing. But as far as I'm concerned, if karma did its job, that busload of kids didn't have to die. But that's their karma, right? So I don't understand the line between victim blaming, spiritual bypassing, and this is karma.
Great, great, great opening, great topic. So before I'll go into more detail, what I'll offer is I've said this before teaching other classes, and certainly for me, here's what resonates as being true to me. Buddhist morality, karma, applies to me. It applies to me. Karma is for, you know, what to do, the right things to do, the method, you know, not be judgmental, to be responsible, to be generous, to all of these things. Who should be doing those things? Me. it's not for me to look out at someone else's karma, blaming them. And there's no spiritual bypass. I mean, but I guess there are people then who like blame themselves and they're like allowing things, because okay, I don't want to incur negative karma, so I'm going to be like a sap. Venerable Rabina talks about like that idiot compassion. Like that's also not smart, right? It's not skillful. So it's being in that zone of when I see something happen, it's not they deserved it. There's never who deserves, like if we knew, if any of us knew, if we saw karma directly, like our behavior would be impeccable. Our words, our thoughts would be impeccable. Also, because if we saw karma directly, that would mean we were a Buddha, Uh, so, but we don't. And so we have this ignorance that is the problem. This ignorance is the thing that keeps this cycle going. It is the hub of the wheel of life, the wheel of samsara, the thing we want to get out of. When we're smart enough to even want to get out of it, that's a good karma. So, if someone gets off, is that a positive karma? It looks like they got off. Actually, karma, according to karma, there's no such thing as getting off. Actually, they did something that even I would say in this life, they're going to have to live with this. There's lots of different ways to think about it, but I'm not going to see how that plays out for that other person. And if I look at, when things happen to children, it's incredibly disturbing, because they appear so innocent, they are so innocent. They haven't had an opportunity to become like us yet, right? But they had that perfect human rebirth. And so I don't know, we can make up a story about, well, they had that perfect thing popping and now it's going to just be something better. I don't know that. I can't say that. What I can say is seeing those things happen do something to me. So in the movie of my life, watching a tragedy helps me to cultivate more compassion. So, do I really know anything about that external world of appearances? I know how it appears to me. Could the whole thing be a divine play? Could it be something that's happening to trigger something in me, some knowledge, some morality, some compassion? And, and so Jay, along these lines, I'd say, and it doesn't have to be true to be functioning. It doesn't have to be ultimately true. And in fact, we're saying there is no such thing as ultimate truth. So there's appearances and there's how we use those appearances. That's what I can control. So that's what I can control. So judging someone else, it's like, okay, maybe they're just showing me how not to be, providing a perfect example, like hopefully the guru provides a perfect example of how to be. And then conversely, we run into these people that seem to be providing a perfect example of how not to be. And then I think, because one of the things I suffer from is sometimes having the feeling of like, well, then I'm so good, compared to that person, they're bad and I'm good. And it's really, this is what's ripening for me now. But again, with a grain of salt, past and future lives. But even in this life, I have sniffs, I have flavors that are similar to the most negative things I see. And if I don't think I have that, then I personally challenge myself to look. I remember thinking, right after I met the Dharma, I had this great boss, and I got rid of everything, and I went to live at Land of Medicine Buddha, and I was the SPC there, and it was wonderful. And there were all these lamas coming through. It was truly a rainfall of many of the last of the Tibetan teachers coming through. Such a blessing. And then, on the last day that I was there, I had this realization that I've done nothing the whole time I was there. Like I really didn't, I was enjoying, and I was going to the teachings, but I really didn't feel like I had moved my mind at all. And in a way, it was really good to get a job and be in the world. But I get this job and, I start thinking, I'm never going to gossip in the worst workplace again. I'm never going to be I'm never going to do, and that didn't last very long before I saw my mind. So I think, sometimes we think we're just not in a situation that we see those aspects of ourselves, but those circumstances could change, whether it's in a future life or whether it's in another circumstance in this life. So what we're doing as we're meditating is really digging in and looking at our own minds and finding, literally hunting down our ignorance and our little mental afflictions, the ones that we don't even think we have. And maybe that doesn't seem related to your question, but I think, when we think about karma, I think the only way it's helpful is to really think about it in terms of us. And I think there's always stuff that we're doing that is not, even if we didn't believe in karma and future lives and Buddhahood, like, wow, what if I really was never competitive at all? What if I really never said a divisive thing to anyone else? Wow, that would be like amazing. There should be like a museum of, people who have eradicated, just one silly little thing, like truly eradicated it. So I think as we're talking about karma, and we talk, and there's collective karma and all that. And yeah, other people, it's their karma. But, at the end of the day, I'm the one watching the movie and the movie is bad. That tells me something about me in my mind. And so then it's like, okay, why do I see these things in my world? What? So, and I hope this is okay. We're having a discussion and actually this is great. And I do see you, Nim and Afisha, so just 1 minute. But I think as I'm watching this movie and I see a drunk driver being irresponsible, what can I get from that? Well, am I ever irresponsible? Do I do things that could potentially harm me and others? And this is what's really interesting. When we start studying something like karma, it's like, oh, all day long, holding on to my mental afflictions is harming me and others. It's the cause of the whole world of suffering, the cause of samsara. I know that's heavy, right? That's laying something really heavy on ourselves. But, to me, we don't have to take it necessarily to that level. But I think, okay, I'm seeing this in my world. Like, what am I doing? Or I see like the world looks so divisive and there's so much selfishness. Where am I? Where am I planting those seeds in my mind and my life now? And, that can seem like a very small job, I guess, relative to changing the world. But, according to Buddhism, that is how we will change the world. That is how we will actually help other living beings, is by really looking at ourselves. And that's it. Really doing the work on our own minds. So that's, I don't know. I don't know if that was satisfactory response or maybe not even on topic entirely, but
No, Bonnie, that was helpful because for me, it's kind of like you said, it shows where maybe I can marinate with a little bit more because logically I can understand everything you're saying. But then if something in my actual world hits too close to home with it, it's like all my understanding goes out the window. Yeah.
yeah, no.
A bit more.
Yes. And you're not alone. That happens. That's why we practice and meditate, because the circumstance change and all of a sudden all of our things, all of our principles, all of our things go out the window. And that's why, okay, maybe if past and future lives are hard to digest, how about just a complete change in circumstance? Can I imagine that? Yeah. And so what does that look like? Okay, so now, Nim, thank you for being so patient.
It's Afisha this time.
Oh, only you got, but you're both there, right?
Yeah, we're both here.
Okay.
So this was just my own reflection based on what Jay was saying. I used to be in a similar place with karma and rebirth and future lives and past lives. And I think as I expose myself more to the teachings, what I what the conclusion that I drew was, and it was my own mind, it was just to say, well, what if there is? Like, I do not want to come to the end of my life and realize on my deathbed or while I'm sick and dying, hopefully that's the way it works, that there is another life or future lives, that karma is real. And then I had had the teachings, had a whole lifetime to prepare, and did absolutely nothing because I spent all that time trying to decide if it was real or if it's not. Like, I got to the point where I'm like, it's irrelevant if it's real or if it's not real. But what if it is at the end of life when I could do simple things that, to Jay's point, you're a good person, you're going to save people, you're going to help people, you're going to do it anyways. So why not do it and not get hung up on, is rebirth real? Are future lives real? Are past lives real? Is what I'm experiencing now as a result of karma that I've created? What I do, how does that impact my life, next life? And just think, well, if I'm a good ethical person following Buddhist teachings and future lives are real, then I'm covered. And if it's not real, then I'm still covered. I'll still end up in heaven. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's a
I,
heaven or I'll still end up in heaven. If it's a future life, then I'll get a good rebirth. Like
yeah.
so I moved away from focusing so heavily intellectually on, is it real? I need evidence. I need this. I need that. Because I used to be like that, so strongly intellectual in Buddhism, in Buddhist teachings, to the point where if it is, then I'm covered. And if it's not, then I'll end up in heaven anyways. Because it covers both. Right? And so
Yeah.
that gave me a little bit of security, I guess, or assurance in my own mind that I can be a good person, that I can practice the teachings, and I can move away from that to the point where now I can see.
Mhm.
But now I believe it. Now I can see, and yeah, now I'm at a point where I don't need to question, I don't need to wonder, I don't need to think about it because no matter what I do, I can't change whether or not it's real, but I can be prepared if it is.
Jay was doing a thumbs up, and I think she was saying something similar. But I think the reality is we're in a course talking about karma, right? So I think it's kind of like kind of natural that it would come up like, all right, but that sort of makes me interested, Jay, why you're here tonight. But maybe it's that you're like, oh, prove something to me. Sorry, you got the wrong girl for
No,
that.
no, 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 no. I'm here because I am trying to get my head around Buddhist
Yeah,
concepts.
yeah,
That's why I show up at Discovering Buddhism and have done for quite a while, actually. So,
yeah.
yeah. And I
I could
appreciate
tell
how
you
much
were practicing and
I
and all of that.
appreciate your interactive approach to this. It's really helpful for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's everything that everyone is saying is right on. And, you know, we are in the trenches together. Like this is samsara. That whole idea, like in the trenches, like in some kind of like a dangerous place and, you know, fighting something, trying to accomplish something, trying to survive. And I think that's a apropos, even though I'm terrible with my metaphors, I think it's sort of good. Like it's on target. Like we're in the trenches. Like we're all, in different places, struggling with different, seemingly different things. But I think ultimately the same things. Like we're in samsara. This is not a good place to be. On the best day, you know, on the best day, what's bad about that? Well, the next day isn't going to be so great. We're all going to die. These things are all going to happen. So, um, just being here and preparing ourselves and having these kinds of discussions and, pushing ourselves a little more. But I think, and now I forget who, I think maybe it was Jennifer about, when do you see results? It could just be suddenly it just pops, right? Like you're doing all this, we're doing all this grappling and we're trying and we're working on ourselves and we're trying to wrap our minds around these things and sometimes it seems easier or, gosh, as a brand new Buddhist, it's embarrassing. I thought I had bodhicitta. I mean, I want to laugh. It's 30 years later. I don't have bodhicitta. I'm sorry. I'm going to tell you the truth. I wish I did. I wish I did. What would that look like? That looks like never having a selfish thought. Like it looks like room, like for everyone. all sentient beings, like understanding, like I'm just one and there's the many, and I would just be serving, serving, serving. But as a new Buddhist, like I was like, check, bodhicitta, check, I got that one. And it's comical. But I think, then it's 30 years of similar feelings, like, oh, now I've got something. And then the circumstances of life change, and suddenly I don't have access to that in the way that I did, at another time. Um, but that doesn't mean that's not progress. And it doesn't mean that we're not actually cleaning up some of that negative, negative karma and making the way for something positive. Um, and things are getting better. Things are getting better even as they seem like they're getting worse. And I do really feel and believe that. Um, wow. I'm so, like, I have to say I'm so tickled that at the interaction. I've done a few of these courses, and it's just so nice to, I think this is the benefit of a class like this, as opposed to where when you have like a really holy teacher, like the really holy teachers are so important to have, like they're way more important than me. But there's something to be said for, being in the trenches with others, us being here together and kind of working on things together, and being, at different places and being able to relate to each other. There's some benefit to that as well. Um, Kind of the perfect mix is, you sit with the holy lamas, and then you have your Dharma peeps, your Sangha, that you connect with, and kind of what does it mean? And what does it look like? How do I practice? And then, help each other not to fall into negative things. Even in Dharma groups, it's very easy, like, especially, around the lamas, like everybody wants to be around the lamas, and everybody wants to be loved. It's like you want to be the favorite son. And, you see like people competing and sort of vying, and little tiny little divisive things. It's like we're kind of like children in some ways. Um, but we can help each other. We can, um, yeah, help move each other along, and trigger things in each other, our understanding. So this is not what I thought today, but I think it's better, to be frank, than what I was going to talk. Eugene, hey, please.
Hi. Um, I just want to make a few comments how I see all these concepts. I think that enlightenment is not really goal, because the path is more important than the outcome. And the reason for that is, if we make anything into object, like enlightenment, then our actions become goal-oriented and not everyday behavior-oriented. This on one side. So the path is much more important than the outcome. And because of that, it's much more important to watch myself, what I'm doing every day, than to think what will happen to my karma. Because I cannot understand what will happen to my karma.
Yeah.
I have no access to the counter. I have no access to how it works at every second. And whatever I guess about it is just my fantasy. And fantasy is blindness.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of seeing life, I see whatever my fantasy is, and I cannot see life well. This on one side. Second, it's impossible to achieve something if one doesn't believe in the path and in the outcome. For example, if I have to, I'm in Northeast, upstate New York. And for example, I want to be in Los Angeles. And the way to get there is to fly. But I don't believe that airplane is safe, or it works for me. So I will never get there because I don't believe in it. So without being devoted to the path and to the concept, it's impossible to use it, because those hesitations will obscure the path all the time. So there are some things in life we just accept without thinking about it. For example, the earth is round. Do we have direct proof of that? No. Right? But we still trust that it's round. And there are many concepts which we just accept as they are without challenging them. We even don't think about it, but there are a lot. So I think it's second very important thing. And third, karma is not insurance. So thinking that I'm doing something good and I'm kind of, my karma is now working way I want it, and that gives me ticket to good reincarnation, everything goes great. It just doesn't work like this.
So I'd like to just comment a little on some of this stuff, because I think you're right, and I actually think that's on the first 2 points. Kind of everyone has sort of said, like, we don't have the experience of enlightenment. So, and the only thing that we can have experience of, the only thing that we can do is practice the path. But what's interesting though is you said you have to, you've got LA, and if you want to get there, it's the path. But if you never take the plane, or you could even say car or plane, if you don't believe in those things, or you don't have access to them, you can never get to LA. But I would just offer LA could be like enlightenment. So you also have to believe that there's a place that the path is going, and to your point about taking things on trust, I think is really what you're saying. Because when you talk about unexamining, not examining, certainly Buddha, and someone said earlier during this class, said, do check out what I'm saying, do analyze, don't just take my word for it. And what does that mean? It means the things that we're able to practice, the things that we're able to analyze, to see if it makes, is it logically consistent, internally consistent with itself? Is there, experientially, does it make sense? And then the other thing is, did someone I trust tell me this? Because when we believe that the earth is round, or we believe that the medicine that the doctor gives us is going to help us, what we're doing is we're putting our faith and trust in someone because for somehow we've decided that they are worthy of our trusting them. Even if it's the first grade teacher telling us, the earth is round, or ABC, whatever that is, they're some trusted authority. So I would say Lord Buddha has become a trusted authority for me. But I wouldn't say if a person wasn't Buddhist, then I would, so I'll tell you, even things that I believe in a very hardcore, strong way, I would never try to convince someone who didn't, see Lord Buddha as a trustworthy authority, because that just doesn't make sense. I have to appeal to them from something that they could access. And frankly, even as a Buddhist, and I think, maybe that's a little bit Jay's inclination, like maybe all of us, that we're looking for things that we can understand and not take just because someone told us, right? And so the Buddha as a trusted authority, but even that, I think we have to do, being on the path means that we are trying to practice what he said. And right, so if I trust in the Buddha, then, what did he say? He said, there's the truth of suffering, and the truth of the path, and the truth of enlightenment, a cessation of suffering. So those are the things he taught. And this is how to get there. But you're right. It's like that destination, Buddhahood, enlightenment. And we've kind of talked about it, seems so inaccessible to us right now. We seem so far away, but the path is something that we can have an experience of. And the, the qualitative nature of the, effect that the path has on us in this lifetime is something that we can experience. We can experience as I practice the path, how is that benefiting me? And to your point, it doesn't mean it's a bed of roses. It's not a guarantee that things are going to be happy and perfect. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do Vajrasattva and then expect that I'm not going to ever have a problem again. Or, I'm going to make a donation or, give offerings and then I'm going to expect that I never have to worry about money. It isn't like that. And in fact, those are kind of trivial sorts of things. And I think that's sort of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's not insurance,
Yeah.
for sure. And it's not team sport, So to be associated with people who live life more wholesome does not provide anything for me because I have to live my life.
Yeah.
And I want to note a couple more things from what you said, but I don't want you to think that I'm trying to critique you, and I don't want you to take it personally.
Oh, that as a Buddhist, debate is like, yeah. So again, my friend the Larampa Geshe, he used to say like, wow, what is it all Westerners or is it just Americans? We can't debate, and you actually look in our world, whoa, people can't have a hard time just having a discussion. And like, there doesn't have to be like a winner and a loser. And sometimes it's like, it just moves our mind a little. Or, we have the discussion, then I feel like this is truer for me and this validates it. You could have a totally different experience. So yeah, I'm pretty open and I think in a Buddhist context, we all should be willing to be, questioned, right? And not just take something, but it's like what makes sense to me. Um, and I, you talk about the path and not the destination, but I'm like, okay, I understand that. I understand how, all I have experience of is the path. And the path there's a lot of good things about the path. And it hasn't been insurance in terms of, not having problems in this life. And I'm even, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think I'm eligible for some real yuckiness. I have a lot of karma, a lot of karma. And, I don't have renunciation. And by the way, I don't have bodhicitta and I have not seen emptiness directly. Okay, those are the three things we need. And I have not achieved one of them, in spite of the fact that as a brand new Buddhist, I thought bodhicitta, check. I want to laugh. I gotta laugh at myself, right? So we're practicing, we're growing, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate everyone's discussion today. I think it's been great.
This is what I want to say.
Sure.
Okay, it will not take. So everything in our language, because our language is what we have in our head even without realizing it. So when we say I'm trying something, it means that I don't take responsibility for the outcome because just trying.
I
Right?
would debate you on that.
No, I'm not
Have
trying
enough
to.
time tonight.
You just reminded me. It's not about you. You just reminded me. So I understood this, 10 plus years ago. And since that, I don't say try. And when I was having business, I taught my employees that they cannot tell me that they will try, because if they try, they don't take responsibility for the outcome, and it cannot be done well. But it's very important. It's very important. It's in the head.
So I'm not perfect.
No, it's not about you.
No, but I'm an example. So what you're saying is that if you say try, anybody, me, not about me, anybody says try, then they're not related to the outcome. They're not focused on the outcome. They're not
They
doing.
don't take responsibility.
They're not taking
achieving the
responsibility.
outcome.
So I just totally disagree with that.
Okay.
To try is trying for what? So if what we're talking about is perfection, then I'm not that. And I'm not going to be that because although I also had that debate with someone once, like, okay, just go under the Bodhi tree like the Buddha did, touch your hand to the ground and get enlightened. Like, seriously, because that's almost what you're saying. And it's like, I can't do it. I couldn't, I can't. So, but what can I do? I can incrementally, uh, make myself better. I can identify the shortcomings in my mind and really taking responsibility for them. And when someone does something negative to me, I can take responsibility for that. Like, how am I reacting to that? How am I responding to that? How have I created that? How have I planted similar seeds in the course of my life? So I think we have to say try. Because otherwise, then, and maybe Eugene, go outside, find the tree. It doesn't have to be a Bodhi tree. Beings get enlightened under all kinds of trees. If you don't have to try and you could just do it, and you know what? I'm not really saying this facetiously. At some level, it's like, that's the truth, man. That's the truth. Someday, there'll be the time when we can do it. But right now, it's not where I am.
Okay.
So I have to try that. So that's what I say. And then maybe you know something I don't know. There's room for that. There's certainly room for that.
And another thing, when we say I practice Buddhism, it separates practice from life. It's like, this is my life, and this is when I practice. So it's impossible to do this practicing. It should be done living. This
totally
is my understanding. Okay.
Totally. Yeah.
So I try to practice and I live it. It's two different universes.
Yeah.
And when someone says, I try to practice, it conveys to me a lot of hesitance.
So, but I would just say you might be reading something in there that's not there because, there's the practice of like meditation practice, right? Which is when you say practice in that sense, it means it is literally like getting your mind in a situation so that when you're out there, you get up from your meditation cushion and you go out into the world, then your actions are in alignment with what you want to be, right? It's like a training, it's a mental training to be able to go and live your life, to show up in the world in the way that you aspire to showing up. Without that practice, then somebody says something or the circumstances change and all of a sudden, and that's what we've been kind of talking about. Like, I can be a very benevolent person when everything is going my way. But what if everything goes not my way? What if everybody criticized me? What if all of you, decided to like write letters about what a terrible, class this was and she should never, and what if I felt, you know, yeah, what if I was put down, whatever? Like, how would I feel then? How would I be then? How would I act? What would I say? So if I'm meditating, I'm preparing for that. And you know what? It could happen. And if it happened, then there's a way that I would think of it and a way that I would act and respond. And it would not be the way I would have, the person with this mental continuum would have acted and responded 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Oh, now I'm really old. And I'd say 50 years ago, but I was a kid then. So, right. So the practice has actually helped me that if I were suddenly in what if everyone turned and Lojong, which is another thing I love to teach because Lojong is for the strong at heart. Uh, when the crap hits the fan, when the world falls apart, when everyone turns against you, when the people that you helped are criticizing you, what do you do then? What do you do then? Who do you blame? My own selfishness, my own self-centeredness, my own ignorance. That's who's to blame. That's a warrior. So, and that's a practice. And and that's not something that I can't, I'm not saying I would do it perfectly. I actually know I wouldn't. But I know it would be a lot closer to how I would want to be showing up. I know it would be a lot more closely aligned with what my holy teachers have taught me, today. And
Each of,
yeah, so I love this, by the way. I love all of this. I appreciate all of you, your different perspectives, your thoughts. I feel like it's valuable to me, but then maybe I'm the only one benefiting, and I've just, I haven't wasted your time because you had a good motivation for being here. So no matter what happened over this hour and a half, you have created some good karma, right? You've done something. There's a motivation, a reason why you're here, a destination that you want to get to. Well, even if the path is the destination, and I wouldn't really argue against that. So the path is the destination. We set our motivation for being here. Here we are. We spent this time together, like, oh wow. Um, it's all goodness. And so yeah, I hope you all bring more of this next week. uh, because a lot of the lists of, the for this and the for, we've kind of gone through a lot of that. So this is good. I have some other stuff that I want to cover, but if I would say this is more important for me, it's because that other stuff we can get somewhere else. Um, but maybe, the connection with each other and the discussion is something unique to this group. So I'm super grateful. And let's take a few minutes to just dedicate the virtue of our time together. Our attention, our time, our motivation. And certainly, I would say, may it ripen as realizations in our own minds. May we cut the root of ignorance and first identify, and then eliminate all of our own mental afflictions. That we can truly be beings who are totally motivated to help others. And in that way, perfectly practice with our wisdom and our compassion, walking in the world, walking the path to enlightenment. And may all of our holy teachers have long and healthy lives, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And may we always have good Dharma friends and help along the path. And may all the realizations of the path quickly ripen in our own minds. And again, I thank you. This was actually a really fun hour and a half. I mean, I hope it was fun and not tedious. It would be horrible if it was just fun for me and tedious for all of you. I really hope that is not the case. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful week. I hope to see your faces again next week. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for everything.